Okay, it's 12 o'clock. Welcome to our professional development series for the summer. Kicking off our summer series with a workshop on what resumes should look like in the modern world. And so, just a couple of housekeeping items before I get started, and that is to number one, thank you all for investing a part of your time to join us for this educational event. We're going to record it. So we're recording right now, and we will follow up after this event with an email that'll have the link to the recording as well as the PowerPoint, the presentation, the deck that I'm going to use. I'm going to also send through some attachments on the chat as we make our way through the presentation, and we'll include those attachments as well. Now we're going to use our registration link. So if you registered through our events portal, then you'll automatically get that email when we're finished this afternoon. If you came to this event through LinkedIn or a link that I may have sent you directly, I would ask that you send me an email if you would like to have the recording and all the attachments that we're going to send through. And so with that being said, we're going to get started. I am going to have plenty of time at the end of this presentation for any questions. But I do also encourage everyone to, stop me if you have pointers, if you have intel, if you have market insights that you'd like to share with the group. All of the research that I do here at Wake Forest is dependent on people giving us information and intel from the market. And so would absolutely love to hear from anyone during this presentation if you have anything to offer. And so here we go. So my name's Sharon Vogler, and I am the Director of Alumni Career Development here in the Business School. This is a new role that the Business School has just rolled out this past fall. So I've been in this role since October of 2023. Prior to that, I spent 12 years here in the Business School supporting students. So all kinds of students in the graduate business school. I've supported MBA students in the past, undergrads, and I can tell you that working here in the School of Business is the best thing that has ever happened to me. And one of the things that makes that so incredible is to be able to share intel and information with people like you. And so a big part of this role is to curate resources. And so I'm going to talk about resources here at the beginning, and I'm also going to I'm going to end with resources as well once we wrap up. But I wanted to call out three really important resources before we really dive into resumes. These QR codes are going to link you to online resources that you have access to as an alum. The first one is the School of Business Events and Resources. The next one is a YouTube channel. So every time we do one of these events or a webinar, we record them, and we keep those recordings on a YouTube channel. And so you can Google it. It's the School of Business, Wake Forest University School of Business YouTube channel, and it'll pull up so many incredible resources for you to watch. And then lastly, I'd like to call out the university alumni personal career development page. It's also full of some tremendous resources, no matter where you are on the job search continuum or anywhere in your own personal career development. You'll find something there that will absolutely help you keep moving forward. But today we're going to talk about resumes. And resumes have changed a lot over the last, especially over the last 5 years. They continue to change rapidly. And so we're going to talk about ways for you to think about designing your resume, why it's so important, what applicant tracking systems are, And then again, I'm going to end with talking about some additional resources that will be super helpful for you. So let's dive in. Applicant tracking systems have changed the world of resumes, and it's changed it. These changes using AI and using technology are super helpful for employers. So employers get hundreds, if not thousands, of applications for every job posting that they advertise. And so these applicant tracking systems, or ATSs that we call them, are vital for companies to streamline and weed out, if you will, people who aren't necessarily qualified for the job. So it makes it real easy on recruiters and for firms to keep up with how many people are applying for their jobs, if they have any kind of EEOC or DEI types of goals that they have, then it helps them with reporting. But most specifically, it helps recruiters sort through hundreds and hundreds of resumes and applications to hopefully streamline the process. Now, I will say, the application process is long and it's excruciating. And so if I don't give you any more advice today, I would give you the advice to stay patient. The system is very cumbersome and it's very long, and it makes it a lot easier on the employer, and it puts a lot of burden on the candidate or the applicant. Okay. And so I'm hoping that today, when we finish, you'll have some resources and have some techniques so that you can get through these applicant tracking systems and get your resumes seen. And hopefully, right, what we really want to have happen is that you get an interview. And so that's what an applicant tracking system is. It is, right, the software that it's used by recruiters and employers. That makes the hiring process, it collects applications, it sorts it, scans them, and it ranks applicants, right? And so you want to be on the top part of that ranking system. And so, most of the companies that are recruiting people are using these applicant tracking systems. So the research says that 95% of the companies out there are using some sort of ATS platform. And they've also said that 60%, right, of applicants, qualified applicants, are missed because of this applicant tracking system. And that 75% of applications are automatically rejected. So, raise your hand, use the reaction feature on Zoom if you've ever applied for a job, and within minutes you get this automatic thanks but no thanks template email that says thank you for applying, but you're not qualified, or we're going with another. I see Ian has raised his hand, right? And so so it's actually not a person that has actually looked at your application or looked at your resume, and a person did not determine that. A software system or a platform has made this decision, right? So human eyes are very rarely even on these things. So I've cited a couple of popular applicant tracking systems. Workday seems to have the market share right now. If you've ever applied for a job with Wake Forest, I've got some friends that work with me here at Wake Forest. If you've ever posted a job or hired anybody here at Wake Forest, all of our job applications go through our Workday system. ADP has a good one. This iSIMS is super popular. We've started to see them start to merge and combine. So Taleo and Oracle have come together. And so this landscape is changing very rapidly. as well. But I think the key point here is to know that 95% of the companies that that hire people, right, are using some sort of applicant tracking system. And so you've got to have applicant tracking compliant resumes to hopefully make it through. I will also say at this point that the number one way to bypass an applicant tracking system is to use your network. And I'm not going to talk a whole lot about networking today because I'm really going to focus on the nuts and bolts on what needs to go on a applicant tracking system compliant resume. But the networking is still the best resource for you to think about when you're applying for jobs. And so so having someone within the organization who can walk your resume over or email it over to a colleague and say, hey, I know this person, they've applied for this job and we really should talk to them, or can you at least look at their resume, will absolutely get you out of this applicant tracking system and pull you into at least review category, right? And so please keep that in mind, that the tips and techniques that I'm going to go over today, they're just directional and it's not scientific. But we do know that relationships and advocacy and networking is your number one tool, right? It's your best. It's your best resource into getting your application seen. I also read a very sobering statistic the other day, and that statistic was that a candidate, a very qualified candidate, if they're applying for the right types of jobs that they're qualified for, has to apply to 80 jobs before they can get one offer. 80 jobs. Now, we've done some good research here at Wake Forest, and if you are applying for a job, you have to think that that's going to take at least 30 minutes, sometimes 45 minutes to an hour to apply for one job. Because you have to think about the cover letter. You have to think about some techniques that we're going to go over today of how you're telling your story on this piece of paper. And so that's a huge commitment of time. And that's one offer. That doesn't mean you're going to accept that offer. Okay. So you really have to build that resilience, right? Those muscles and know that the process is long, and you know you need to have quality applications, but sometimes you got to push yourself to apply for a lot of jobs just to get any activity. Okay. So most of what we're going to spend the time on today is formatting and content. We get this question a lot here at the School of Business, especially with our alumni. And so we're going to dive right into, you know, these nuts and bolts about what your resume should look like. Now, this is just one example of a template that, and I'm going to drop, I'm going to attach these at the end. I'm going to attach a Microsoft Word template for you at the end of this presentation, so you will have it today. But we've built this in Microsoft Word, and something that that we've paid very close attention to in building out this resume template is that it flows really nicely. There, if you will notice, there aren't any inserted tables, and there aren't any, a lot of times you'll see some skills pulled out over to the side, and you'll see some embedded tables in here. And I will say that anytime you embed a table or an icon, like I've seen real cute like phone icons or you know, locator icons. Applicant tracking systems can't read those very well, and so it will distort your application, especially if you have those tables inserted. So our advice is to not have tables inserted. A lot of people will insert these lines here. See, I have a line underneath core strengths, and we've used the underline feature in Microsoft Word to get that line there. So I have seen a lot of resumes that come out with this inserted like image to get that line. That will cause an applicant tracking system to stop dead in its tracks. And so you want to avoid any tables or inserted icons. And so let's start from the very beginning, and that is with your name, right? And so I have suggested that you keep your name in all caps, and it needs to be the name that you want to go by. So if your legal name is Joseph Samuel Johnson III, but you go by Joe Johnson, you need to use Joe Johnson here, okay? And it needs to be consistent. So your email should say Joe Johnson, your LinkedIn should say Joe Johnson. You should have, you need to make it as consistent as you possibly can with any and all ways of communicating to the market who you are, okay? I also use this technique of using all caps there because you'll stand out in a list. So if a recruiter gets a list of 25 applicants for a job, she's going to see, depending on she or he, depending on which applicant tracking system they're using, they'll just see a list of names. And if yours is in all caps, it's just a little bit of a finesse that helps you stand out. We also have what we call flex lines. And the first flex line that I'll point out is the line right after your name. I call this a headline. And so this is a fantastic opportunity to send a direct signal of alignment that you are perfectly aligned with the needs of the organization. Now, you don't want to lie. If you've never been a director of financial services, you don't want to say that you're a financial services director. But especially if you just pay attention to the director part of that, it's real important that under this headline, let's say that you've had a job for the last 4 years and your title is associate, but you've actually like an associate director of strategy, right, at a consulting firm, but it's associate is your title, but you're applying for a job that says consultant. I say use consultant there underneath your headline. So you're trying to match the title that you're applying for right underneath your name. And then as you look at the job description, you need to do your own data analysis on this job description, and you need to pull out some characteristics or adjectives that describe who you are, so that again, you're sending that signal from the very second line of this resume that you are aligned with the needs of the organization, okay? So we're done with the day that you have one resume and that you check it off your list and you're done, right? You've made the updates, you've had it edited, you feel really good about it, and now you're just going to spread the word, right? You're going to advertise yourself, you're going to use the same resume for every single job, okay? Those days are gone. We're in an era that we have to think about creating a resume for every job that you apply to. And so I always advise my clients to have a folder on their desktop that says job search. And in this folder, you will have a baseline resume that's fully fleshed out, right? Full of all of the really fantastic things that you've accomplished in your career. But then every time you apply for a job, you will save a resume. You'll save that document and you'll name it your first name and your last name, no dots, no dashes, right? So in my case, it would be Sharon Vogler. If I'm applying for a job as the Director of Career Services at Georgetown, then it would be Sharon Vogler, Georgetown, director, June 2024. So that when Georgetown calls me in 2 months, right, I can go right back to this folder and I can find the specific resume I used when I applied for that specific job. So if we go back to that analysis, about 80 jobs for one offer, right? If that holds true, you're going to have 80 different documents sitting in your resumes folder. Okay, so you need to think about resumes now are the new cover letter. So you have to create a resume specifically for that job. Okay, and this headline right underneath your name is one of the places that I call a flex line. So that line is going to flex every time you apply for a job. Okay. You also don't need to put your whole physical address. It's kind of creepy now to know that your mailing address or your physical address is floating out there, right, on resumes. So if you live in Winston-Salem and you're applying for jobs in Winston-Salem, you should say that you live in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Okay? You don't need a street address. You just need to say Winston-Salem. If I lived in Winston-Salem and I was applying for a job in DC, I would just say North Carolina. Okay. So you have to think about aligning. If a job says relocation is not a part of this compensation package, right? You got to think about just even leaving the city and state off of your resume, right, as you're going forward. So you want a Gmail account. You need to make sure that it doesn't have to be Gmail, but it's a personal email account. If you're still using Yahoo, or if you're still using Hotmail, or if you're still using AOL, I would consider coming up to 2024 standards and getting a Gmail. You also want to include your cell phone, and you want to include a way for them to find you on LinkedIn. So you just want to use your custom URL. You don't want the whole HTTPS LinkedIn / Sharon Vogler / 278378. All right. They can find me on LinkedIn by just my custom URL, which is Sharon Vogler, all lower caps. Okay. And then the next flex line is this summary. And we advise you to use 2 or 3 sentences. You don't want to use a whole paragraph full of text, right? We call them text walls. And if recruiters see text walls, or even any kind of viewer, right, any audience that you send this to that actually human eyes actually get on it, if you have a huge wall of text there, you're going to shut them down. They're not going to read it. So we say keep it short, 2 or 3 sentences that align you to the job. And so you want to use their words as many times, the key words, right? And I'm going to show you a way to find those keywords in just a second from the job description that best align you with the role. And one example that I love to use is years of experience. And so I work with a lot of alumni who have such great, rich experience. Some alumni, they're 15, 20 years into their career. Okay. And so they're automatically motivated to put 20 years of experience because, right, more is better. You think more is better. If you're reading a job description and the job description says that you need 6 to 8 years of experience and you have 20, if you use 20 years of experience, that may automatically shut down your candidacy because an applicant tracking system could automatically determine that you're overqualified. If a recruiter actually reads it and then human eyes are actually on it, the bias, they don't mean to do it, but it's unintentional bias, is that you're automatically overqualified and too expensive. They can't afford you. All right. So back to the job description. If it says 6 to 8 years of experience and you have 20, you need to say that you have 8+ years of experience. you've used their number and the plus. You could even say over 8 years of experience, but you want to try and match up those numbers as much as possible. Okay. ChatGTP is a really helpful resource, and I have very recently used ChatGTP to write this summary. Not write the whole thing, just give me an outline of what should be included. So when you go to in any kind of open AI system, it doesn't have to be ChatGTP. That's just the one that I like to use. And you insert your resume and insert a job description, and you prompt ChatGTP to write 2 or 3 sentences that summarize your candidacy for the job. It's amazing what ChatGTP will spit out. You don't want to copy and paste it. You want to use that as a guide, and it's directional, and make sure it's in your voice, right? Use your writing technique to write this in your style. Okay. But you definitely use your, that's a resource I'm going to point out a little later. The next flex section, right, that I love for people to think about are your core strengths. And we're gonna lead with that, right after this very quick summary. And these are experience and strengths that are relevant to the job that you're applying to. So if you're applying for a project management job and they prefer that you have your PMP certification, then this is a really good example of how you would showcase that on your resume. All right. We tend to like to see mostly the harder skills listed and as these core strengths. But you can absolutely use some softer skills up here if it's emphasized a lot in the job description. I would say that presentation skills and change leadership would be softer skills, whereas PMP and SAP and Salesforce are more things like hard skills. Okay. I like things nice and neat, and I've used the tab feature in Microsoft Word, not an inserted table here, to showcase these. I like them in this rhythm of 9 things. They're lined up nicely. Could you do 12? Sure. I wouldn't do more than 12. Could you do 6? Sure, but I wouldn't do less than 6. So let's say 6 to 12, and 9 feels really neat and tight and direct, right? This is direct alignment with the job needs. All right. And then we're going to get right into professional experience. And professional experience, some of the things that we've learned through the research that we've done here at Wake Forest is that recruiters only really care about the last 10 to 12 years. Okay. So if you have over 12 years of experience, then you'll want to come down here and you'll want to put it in this early career experience section. But you want to use the professional experience section here to really flesh out what you've been up to for the last 10 to 12 years. There's always exceptions to that rule, right? So I've worked at Wake Forest for the last 12 years. I've had 3 or 4 roles here in the last 12 years. And so, if I was applying for another job at a higher ed institution in the career center, then of course they really care about that. But let's say I'm ready to leave higher ed and I want to go back to working at a staffing firm, right? So prior to my time at Wake Forest, I worked for a company called TRC Staffing. Okay. If I wanted to go back into that industry, then I would advise myself to pull out that experience from my early career experience and float it up into the professional experience section because it's relevant, right, to a job that I'm applying to. So again, focus on the last 10 to 12. If you've left an industry or left a firm and it's been over 12 years and you want to go back to that industry or back to that firm, then you might want to think about lifting that up higher and fleshing it out a little bit more than just, the employer name and one accomplishment statement. Okay. Any questions? Let me pause there before I keep going. Okay. On the second page, and this is a really great place to talk about how many pages should you have on your resume. So if you've been out of school for less than 10 years, you should have everything that you need on one page. Okay. That 10-year mark kind of gives you the grace to use that second page. Okay. If you use a second page, we really want you to use at least half of the second page. Okay. And so at the end, I'm gonna include two templates, one pager and a two pager, as well as a checklist that goes over all of these things that I'm talking about. But the next section after your experience section is a skills and certifications section. And I've got this detailed out pretty specifically in what kind of skill or what kind of certification that you're trying to communicate. And so this also should flex depending on the type of job you're applying to. And the best example that I can get, the best analogy that I can make really, is thinking about Microsoft Office Suite. And a lot of people have opinions about Microsoft Office Suite, that everybody should know Microsoft Office Suite, and it's a given that you know Microsoft Office Suite. And that's probably true. But if a job description says that it is required that you are proficient in Microsoft Excel, right? You need to have the words Microsoft, Excel, and proficient on this resume. And you need to repeat Microsoft Excel as many times as you can back here in the content section of the resume. Okay? So it's important to make sure you include it, but what's also important, and you'll see here when we do this comparison, it's important of how many times you've mentioned it, not just that you've mentioned it. We also are getting some very conflicting ideas about these power skills. You can use the word soft skills. I don't like soft skills. I like the word power skill better than soft skill. But you can also use leadership skills. You can use professional skills. And again, I'm seeing some good dialogue about the recruiters hate this line. It's a great way to embed some keywords, but they're really more focused on how you've used all of these skills in your experience, right? So if you say you have strong communication skills, then they want to see here in your experience where you utilize those skills to accomplish things in your work. Okay. So it's very important that we use this as a flex line, but I also want to make sure everyone understands that you've got to showcase where you've used it down in this section. Okay. Now, if you are less than 3 years out of undergrad or grad school, not counting MBA, MBA is different. But if you are less than 3 years out, education is going to go up at the top. If you're more than 3 years out of undergrad or in any kind of pre-experienced graduate program, then education is going to go towards the bottom of the resume. Okay. If you are older than 45 years old, you need to leave these dates off. Okay. Just leave them off. Nobody, wants to think that ageism is a real thing, but it's a real thing. And I'd be a terrible career advisor if I told you any differently. So if you're older than 45 years old, I would leave those dates off. I'd probably leave them off if you're older than 40. Okay. GPA is another thing that people really don't care about that much. As you get into your career, your experience is way more important than your GPA. And then any additional trainings, right? So if you're the company that you've worked for in the past, if they've provided some really relevant training for you, it's a really great place to showcase that training is on your resume. If you've done some sort of a skill gap analysis, let's say that you are a project manager and you really want to continue to be a project manager, but you don't have that PMP, you can take some training. You can do LinkedIn Learning, you can do Coursera or Udemy trainings especially like in social media and in digital marketing. If you take any of these trainings, these online trainings, you can showcase them here. I say yes. It's a really great place to show that not only you had access or had some kind of exposure to these things, but it also showcases your desire to be a lifelong learner. Right. And then any kind of leadership or community involvement can be mentioned here at the end. And any of these sections can be collapsed, they can be combined, they can be moved around. And in the Microsoft Word template that I'm going to send you, you can see how easy it is to do it. See if there's a question in the chat. Let me check it real quick. Okay, great question, Kim. Yes, PDF. So you're going to create your resume in either Microsoft Word. We're getting better at creating in Google Docs, right? I wouldn't create it in Canva unless you're a creative, right? In which everything that I'm talking about is completely different if you're in advertising or in graphic design or in any of those creative type of roles. But most business roles want this business driven resume. So you're created in Google Docs, you're going to create it in Word, and then you're always going to save it in a PDF. So you always want to send it to anyone. You want to send it to anyone who asks for it on LinkedIn and email. You always want to send it in a PDF, and you want to upload it to these applicant tracking systems in a PDF. Good question. Good question. Does anyone else have any questions about formatting before I go on? Here's another question. Can you please explain the rule of thumb for the education for MBAs? Okay. Cat JC1, can you be more specific? Like how it should be, what you should call it?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hey, Sharon, you had mentioned based on years of post-grad or not, where it should be located, but also made a comment that it was different for MBAs. And then you didn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was waiting for the follow-up.
Sure. So if you did your MBA over 15 years ago, I would include it later in your document. If you've just recently completed your MBA, you might want to consider putting your education underneath your core strengths. Just depends on how big of a pivot you're hoping to make. Okay. And so if you've been in advertising for the last 10 years, but you really wanted to get your MBA and pivot out of advertising more into a consulting role, and you've really not done too much consulting, but you concentrated your MBA in strategy consulting, that would be an excellent reason to want to move your education up towards the beginning of your resume instead of towards the end. Does that help answer your question?
Understood. Thank you.
Yes, you're very welcome. Does anyone else have any questions before we go on? The font actually matters. There are 5 or 6 approved applicant tracking compliant fonts. They're included on the checklist. This one was designed with the good old Times New Roman. You just really want it to be something that's easy to read, and you want to use your white space really, really well. And so, really dense text walls will shut people down and shut applicant tracking systems down, actually, if it's too dense. And so just really keep that in mind when you're designing these resumes. Okay, so here's the basic. I mentioned them here. I'm so smart. Times New Roman, Garamond, Georgia, Arial, Calibri, sans serif. You don't want the font size to be any smaller than 10.5 and no larger than 11. You want to keep it really clean and really tight. Never more than 2 pages. If you're in the early part of your career, less than 10, you can keep it to 1 page. No tables, icons, graphs, periods. You got to avoid jargon at any point. You want to avoid using pronouns, and God forbid you have typos. And then I talked about those big wall text, right? You want to break it up as much as you can. And then use a headline to incorporate keywords. Don't skip the soft skills. We're going to talk about Skill Sinker in just a second. Another basic, right, is that resumes are no longer this laundry list of everything you've ever did. It's not a legal document. It's not a journal of every single thing that you've ever did. It used to be 10 years ago, you needed to account for every single year in your career, sometimes now to the month. We're not in that space anymore, right? You need to think in more terms of what you accomplished that drove results that are relevant for the job that you're applying to, right? You really want to focus on that, right? The research tells us that recruiters and hiring managers only really care about the last 10 to 12 years. And then we need to remove some of those dates that might age us. Okay, so as you're building out the bullets, right, that's the meatiest part of your resume. They really need to be accomplishment-driven statements rather than a list of everything that you've ever done, right, or a list of job duties and responsibilities. And so we like to use the skill plus task equals results formula when you're building these accomplishments. And so I always ask myself, like, who did I do this for? You know, what kind of effort, what kind of benefit did this create, right? Who did it matter to? If you can quantify it with a percentage, a number sign, or a dollar sign, it's just going to elevate your resume even more. And then what technology and what kind of soft or power skills did you use? And you need to repeat those as much as you possibly can in the resume. Okay, I'm going to do a demo now. Let's see if I can, hopefully my technology is going to, can everybody see, if you could, just somebody come off of mute and tell me that you can see Skill Sinker.
I can see it.
Yes.
Yes, awesome. Okay, I have, this is a super helpful tool that will allow you to take a job description, and here I've got this career services job. It's a director of career services at Georgetown. Isn't that fun? It's a job that I found online, right? And we want to copy the meaty part of the job description. You don't need all this jargon at the beginning, right? Some disclaimers, just the job responsibilities and the qualifications. If you copy that and jump back over here to Skill Sinker, you can paste the job description here on one side. And then I've got an old resume. Don't judge me. The cobbler's kids, right, have the worst shoes. Mine needs to be reformatted. But I'm going to take this old resume of mine and I'm going to copy the whole thing back over here to Skill Sinker. I'm going to paste it. And then it wants to know the company name. It's Georgetown University. And the title is Director of Career Services. Hit enter. We hit scan. And it's going to do all of this data analysis for me. And it's going to tell me that I'm 59% qualified for this job. Okay. I like to see them above 50, but I really like to see these in the 75 to 80% qualified. You know, I'd like to see those scores, but you don't want to make apple juice out of oranges, and you don't want to lie, and you don't want to, right, try to jam in so many keywords that it's not telling a really compelling story. But Skill Sinker does an amazing job of telling me that 34 hard skills were not found on my resume. And some of these are kind of weird, right? But professional writing and presentation design, hey, right? I designed this PowerPoint. right? I've written so many cover letters, I could probably retire on just the amount of cover letters that I've written, right? I've done program management, right? They're onboarding. There are so many hard skills on here that I can incorporate. Editing, I know Zoom, I know WebEx, I know Salesforce. And there's 13 soft skills that are missing. Okay. These it's frequency, but it doesn't match. We're going to talk about how many times it's on there. Again, this is the cliff notes, right? Into customizing and tailoring resumes. Okay, it's got an email address, it's got a phone number. Look at this, I have 26 quantifiable accomplishments. That's really good. That's really good. And then look at this. Tells me down here, it's going to tell me admissions is mentioned 2 times on the job description. I don't have it mentioned one single time on my resume, right? And so down here, business, it's mentioned 8 times on the job description and only 6 times. So I'm only getting a 75% score. Data, business analytics, not mentioned at all on my resume, okay? Again, this is directional stuff, right? If I've never done business analytics ever, not even one time, and I don't even know what it is, I'm not going to try and incorporate it on my resume because I'm misrepresenting myself, right? But I do some analytics, and I'm pretty familiar with things like Microsoft Power BI. And so I can easily add business analytics to my resume. So it goes on and gives you such helpful directional things that you should consider. Boy, this one's long. They're usually not this long, right? So Skill Syncer is a super helpful resource. You can log on. It's a free database, it's a free platform. They are going to want your money. So they want you to subscribe to a, I think it may be $80 a year, and you can have unlimited scans, right? I say don't pay for it. There's a certain number of scans you get to do for free every month. The last time I checked, you could do 5 free scans a month. But we have so many finesse workarounds here in the School of Business. You can use a different platform like JobScan. There's 2 or 3 other ones. I can't remember the name of them, but I like Skill Syncer and JobScan. You can also use an incognito browser and a different email address and re-register and get 5 more scans. But you can also use things like Word. You can use word clouding. And you can do that. There's tons of free accessible free databases out there that will help you identify these words. Any questions about Skill Syncer? All right, let me get back to my presentation. Here we go. Nope, here. Okay, Shantae, did I get back okay?
You did.
Awesome. I'm gonna treat myself to a brownie after this. I'm like, maybe a Diet Coke might be better. And so
Just go for the brownie, Sharon.
the brownie.
Do the
Okay, I'll go
brownie.
for the brownie. All right. Well, let's talk about some more resources. I talked about the School of Business events page, but here under the School of Business, if you choose Launch Your Career, it's going to take you to some resources that we have curated for our student population. You have access to these resources, so absolutely take advantage of them. Here under For Alumni, there's a really helpful tab it's developing. We're in the process of really building this out, but there are some helpful tools in there. And then if you just Google Alumni Professional Career Development at Wake Forest University, it's going to take you to our APCD site. So many helpful resources that are absolutely free and open to any Wake Forest alumni. And so I highly encourage you to spend some time on these resources, and you can self-serve in a lot of ways. And then my 3 favorite that vital to me in my work that I do is Grammarly. If you don't have Grammarly running on your laptop, then you're leaving some really helpful resources on the table. I have it running behind the scenes, and so it checks my grammar and typos in Microsoft Word, in my emails, my Google email. It even will catch typos and grammar mistakes when I'm in LinkedIn. And so, again, it's completely free and super, super helpful. I use ChatGPT. I've already today, outside of, preparing for this presentation, I've used ChatGPT 3 times today already. So it's free. You don't have to get again, all of these platforms want your money, but I use all these things and I don't pay a dime. And then finally, Skill Syncer is my favorite resume, scanning platform that I really love. Job Scan's another one that I've used a lot, but Skill Syncer seems to be a little easier to use than Job Scan. And then I've left some more resources here. I talked about our YouTube channel. I like there are two really great digital creators on LinkedIn. I follow them on Instagram as well. One is Madeline Mann. She's the self-made millennial. And then Rosie, can't remember her last name. I just call her Rosie the career coach. They have really great digital content. I wish I was that good at creating digital content, but follow them on Instagram and connect with them, and follow them on LinkedIn. They have great, helpful, really easily digestible videos to watch. We talked about Skill Syncer and Job Scan and Grammarly, talked about OpenAI, and then I've got another site here about kind of demystifying or redefining what applicant tracking systems are and why they are so important in the application process. Okay. If you haven't taken anything away from our time together today, hopefully you've taken away that your resumes need to be ATS compliant, and you've gotten some tips and techniques on how to do that. It is so important that you edit and proofread your documents so much. Get 2-3 other sets of eyes on them, because people will catch things that you don't catch. If you know a recruiter, or if you know someone who hires a lot of people and looks at a lot of resumes, ask them for their opinion. But no, resumes, right? You're going to get a lot of different opinions. This is your document and it's your story and it's your brand. So you need to make the best decision for yourself. And then use your resources. I'm so proud of all of you for being on this call today, because you are tapping into some free resources, right? Here in the School of Business and the university, there's so many great resources for you built in here. I am happy to help edit and proofread resumes. I encourage you to make sure you make the changes that I've gone over today. And if you email it back to me in a Microsoft Word document, I can very easily and quickly turn those back around. And so that's all I've got today. I do have a few minutes. Let's see where we're at on time. I've got 7 minutes and I can answer any questions that any of you have. Just go off of mute and ask away. Oh, we got one in the chat. Let's see. Very insightful. Networking or resonate. Oh, Shantae, you're very welcome. I love this kind of feedback. Immediate feedback is right fuel for my soul. But if no one has any other questions, I'll end it and give you six or 7 minutes back in your day. And I thank you all for attending. I'm going to drop these two. I promised you that I would drop these templates in the chat. If you're rewatching this on our YouTube channel, if you will email me, I will make sure that you have access to these resources. Let me get this. Now I can't figure out how to, here's a file. Here they come on my desktop. I have the 1-page resume. There we go. And then the second one is 2-page resume. There we go. Here. And then the checklist. I'll include that as well. Checklist. Resume checklist. There they are. Great. Hope you learned something today, and go Deeks.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Really appreciate it.
You're so welcome, Adam. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Take care.
Bye.